I sat alone in my dark apartment, watching a single pathetic candle melt into a store-bought cupcake. Happy 30th birthday to me. My phone's screen lit up, piercing the shadows. For a split second, my heart jumped. Maybe they finally remembered. Instead, it was a notification from my mother's Facebook page. A photo of my entire family, glasses raised, grinning around a table at a fancy French restaurant. The caption read, "Celebrating our wonderful son David's first big car sale." So proud. They hadn't forgotten what day it was. They simply chose to celebrate a minor milestone of their golden boy on the exact day their only daughter turned 30. For 3 decades, I was the invisible child, expected to quietly applaud from the sidelines. But as I blew out that solitary candle, something inside me finally snapped. They were about to learn that being invisible gave me the perfect cover to do something they never, ever expected. The morning after my invisible birthday, I walked into the sleek, glass-walled offices of my tech firm with a professional smile plastered over my exhaustion. I poured myself a black coffee and buried my lingering heartbreak in spreadsheets and strategy reports. By 10 a.m., my boss, Mr. Thompson, waved me into his office. He slid a crisp white envelope across his mahogany desk, his eyes crinkling with a proud smile. "Project Titan broke all our quarterly records, Sarah," he said. "Revenue is up by 50%, entirely thanks to your strategy. The board agreed you earned this." I opened the envelope. Inside was a bonus check for $120,000. My breath caught in my throat. It was life-changing money. The kind of money that bought absolute freedom. I didn't tell a soul in my family. They had never celebrated my career milestones anyway. To them, my corporate success was just computer stuff, while David's entry-level car sales job was treated like a stroke of unparalleled genius. 3 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Mom. A foolish, tiny spark of hope flared in my chest. Maybe she finally looked at a calendar. Maybe she was calling to apologize. "Sarah, sweetheart." My mother's voice bubbled through the speaker, sickeningly sweet. I immediately knew she wanted something. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" I kept my tone carefully neutral. "Well, we have some thrilling news. David is planning to propose to Chloe next month. He found the absolute perfect diamond ring, but you know how tight things are for him right now. Your father and I chipped in, but he's still short about $30,000. She paused, letting the massive number hang in the air. "A little birdie told me your firm gave out massive bonuses this week. Family helps family, right? Could you transfer the $30,000 to your brother today? He's literally waiting at the jeweler." My knuckles turned white as I gripped the phone. $30,000. A quarter of the money I had sacrificed my nights, weekends, and sanity for, just to buy a piece of jewelry for a brother who couldn't even send me a 2-word text message. "Mom," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Tuesday was my 30th birthday." Silence stretched over the line. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. "Oh, Sarah," she finally sighed, sounding more inconvenienced than guilty. "You know how chaotic things have been with your brother's big promotion. We just lost track of the date, honey. We'll take you out for a quick lunch next week to make up for it, okay? Now, about the wire transfer." She didn't care. She truly, fundamentally did not care. The lingering hope I had desperately clung to for 30 years evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. "No," I said. "Excuse me." My mother gasped, clearly shocked that her reliable family ATM was malfunctioning. I said, "No, Mom. I'm not giving David a dime. My money already has a purpose." "Sarah, don't be selfish. He's your brother." Before she could launch into her usual guilt trip, I ended the call and flipped my phone to Do Not Disturb. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. It was pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I looked down at the $120,000 check still sitting in my purse. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I didn't go back to my spreadsheets after hanging up on my mother. Instead, I packed up my laptop, walked out of my office building, and got into my car. My heart was pounding with a strange, exhilarating rhythm. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't sitting around waiting for an apology that would never come. I was taking control. I drove 2 hours north of Chicago, leaving the suffocating concrete of the city behind, until I reached the tranquil, tree-lined shores of Lake Michigan. I had been browsing real estate listings in secret for months, a harmless fantasy to escape the stress of my family's constant demands. But today, it wasn't a fantasy anymore. The property was breathtaking. It was a beautiful two-story cedar cabin nestled among mature pine trees, with massive floor-to-ceiling windows that perfectly framed the glittering blue water. It had a wraparound wooden deck and a private dock. It was quiet, secluded, and absolutely perfect. "It's a gorgeous property, Sarah," the real estate agent said, unlocking the heavy oak door. She smiled warmly. "Usually, buyers like to bring their parents or a partner to get a second opinion. Are you sure you don't want to show it to your family first before we talk numbers?" "I'm completely sure," I replied, my voice steady and resolute. "They aren't a part of this. This is just for me." Thanks to my flawless credit score and the massive $120,000 bonus check acting as a colossal down payment, the closing process was surprisingly swift. When the agent finally dropped the brass keys into my palm, a profound sense of relief washed over me. This house wasn't just real estate. It was a fortress, a sanctuary where I would never be second best, where I would never be expected to empty my pockets for David's comfort. By Saturday evening, I had moved the essentials into my new master bedroom. The sunset was painting the sky in vibrant shades of crushed violet and burnt orange. I stepped out onto my wraparound deck, wearing a comfortable sweater, and poured myself a generous glass of Pinot Grigio. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the lake against my private dock and the rustle of the wind through the pines. No guilt trips. No passive-aggressive comments. No one asking for my hard-earned money. I pulled out my phone. The screen was still free of any belated birthday wishes from my family. I opened my camera and snapped a simple, unfiltered photo. It captured the stunning lakefront view, my bare feet propped up on the cedar railing, and the glass of wine catching the golden hour light. I opened Facebook and Instagram. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, decades of conditioning screaming at me to keep the peace, to stay quiet, to remain the good, invisible daughter. I silenced that voice. I typed out the caption, making sure every word was a deliberate strike against the false narrative my parents had spun for years. Family forgot my birthday again. But this time I used my bonus to buy a lake house. Birthday gift. To myself. I stared at the words. They were raw, honest, and completely unapologetic. I tapped share on all platforms. Then, I didn't put my phone on Do Not Disturb like I normally would. I turned the ringer volume all the way up, set the phone face up on the wooden table, and took a sip of my wine. The match was struck. Now, I just had to sit back and watch the bridge burn. For the first 2 minutes, the lakeside remained perfectly still. The only sound was the wind whispering through the pines. Then my phone screen lit up. A single chime echoed across the wooden deck. Then another. And another. Within 60 seconds, the device was vibrating continuously, buzzing like an angry hornet against the cedar table. I sat back in my Adirondack chair, watching the barrage of notifications roll in with a twisted sense of fascination. Missed call Mom 14. Missed call Dad 9. Missed call David 22. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I let them roll to voicemail, pouring myself another splash of wine. When the ringing finally paused, I tapped the voicemail icon and played them on speakerphone, letting their true colors broadcast into the open air of my new sanctuary. My mother's voice filled the quiet evening, completely stripped of the sickeningly sweet, manipulative tone she had used just days ago. "Sarah Elizabeth, what on earth do you think you are doing? Take that post down immediately. The Millers and the Hendersons are already texting me. Do you know how humiliating this is for us? You're making us look like terrible parents over a silly little calendar mistake. Call me back right now. And delete that picture." Next came my father. His voice was a low, authoritative rumble, the exact tone that used to make me shrink into myself as a terrified child. "I don't know what kind of childish tantrum this is, Sarah, but it ends today. Buying a house without consulting the head of this family? Hoarding money that should have gone to your brother's future? You will call your realtor, you will cancel this absurd purchase. And you will apologize to your mother. We are a family and family supports David. Finally, I opened the text thread from David. I scrolled through the messages, each one more venomous than the last. Are you insane? You're trying to ruin my engagement because you're pathetic, jealous, and single. Sell the damn cabin and wire me the $30,000, or you are dead to me. I mean it, Sarah. You'll have no family left. I set the phone down, the cool lake breeze washing over my flushed face. For 30 years, the threat of losing my family's love was the invisible chain that kept me compliant. It was the weapon they used to extract my time, my energy, and my money. But reading those words now, feeling the solid wood of my own house beneath me, the chain simply snapped. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. They weren't apologizing. Out of dozens of messages and voicemails, not a single one said, "We are so sorry we hurt you." Not one said, "We should have remembered your birthday." Their outrage wasn't born out of love or regret. It was pure, unadulterated panic. They were terrified that their perfect, polished family facade had been shattered for all their country club friends to see. More importantly, they were absolutely furious that their reliable, silent ATM had suddenly closed its doors. I took another sip of my wine, the taste richer than before. It tasted like absolute freedom. The little girl who used to cry alone in her room, desperate for a crumb of affection, was officially gone. I powered my phone off entirely, tossing it onto the cushion beside me, and watched the stars slowly appear over the water. Let them scream into the void. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. But tonight, this lake house was mine, and for the first time in my life, I was untouchable. Monday morning arrived, pulling me away from the tranquil shores of Lake Michigan and back to the bustling, concrete heart of Chicago. As I drove into the city, my phone remained powered off in the passenger seat. I didn't need to turn it on to know it was overflowing with toxic voicemails and manipulative texts. I parked my car and walked into the grand, marble-floored lobby of my corporate building. I was wearing my sharpest tailored suit, clutching my briefcase like a shield. Here, I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was Sarah, the brilliant strategist who had just secured a $120,000 bonus. But as I approached the security turnstiles, my heart plummeted into my stomach. Standing near the reception desk, pacing like a caged animal, was David. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and his face was flushed with a mixture of exhaustion and rage. The moment his eyes locked onto mine, he charged across the lobby. "You think you can just turn off your phone and hide from us?" David's voice echoed sharply off the marble walls, drawing the eyes of several morning commuters. I froze for a fraction of a second, the old childhood conditioning urging me to shrink away, to apologize, to keep the peace at all costs. But then I remembered the cedar deck. I remembered the feeling of signing the deed to my house. The panic evaporated, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. "David," I said, my voice dropping to a low, firm register. "You do not belong here. This is my workplace." He let out a scoff, stepping into my personal space and using his height to loom over me, a classic intimidation tactic he had used since we were teenagers. "I wouldn't have to be here if you hadn't pulled that psychotic stunt this weekend. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mom is literally hyperventilating in the living room. Dad's golf buddies are calling him, asking why his daughter is publicly humiliating the family. "You are a disgrace, Sarah. The only disgrace here is your absolute lack of self-awareness," I replied, refusing to step back. "You and your parents ignored my 30th birthday, celebrated your minor work achievement, and then had the audacity to demand $30,000 of my money." The post wasn't an insult, David. It was just the truth. And if the truth ruins our family's reputation, then the reputation was a lie to begin with. David's face contorted. He darted a look around the lobby, noticing that people were starting to stare, but his entitlement completely overrode his embarrassment. He stepped even closer, backing me toward a large concrete pillar. "Listen to me, you selfish brat," he hissed, pointing a finger mere inches from my face. "Chloe is expecting a 3-carat ring. I already promised it to her. You're going to call that real estate agent right now, cancel the purchase of that stupid cabin, and wire me the money. You owe me. You are my sister, and you are supposed to support this family. The audacity was so staggering it almost took my breath away. He genuinely believed my life's work existed solely to fund his luxuries. I don't owe you a single cent, I said, my voice rising, ringing clear and sharp across the lobby. I earned a $120,000 bonus through my own sweat and tears. You want a ring for Chloe? Go earn it yourself instead of trying to extort your sister. The word extort made him snap. He raised his hand and slammed it hard against the concrete pillar right next to my head, trying to make me flinch. Don't you dare use that word with me. You will give me that money, Sarah, or I swear to God. I didn't flinch. Instead, I raised my hand and caught the eye of Marcus, the head security guard I greeted every single morning. He was already jogging over, a stern look on his face. Miss Sarah, is there a problem here? Marcus asked, stepping smoothly between David and me, his hand resting cautiously on his radio belt. Yes, Marcus. This man is trespassing and harassing me, I said evenly. David scoffed, trying to put on a charming, arrogant smile for the guard. Back off, pal. I'm her brother. This is just a family dispute. I don't care if you're the Pope, Marcus said, his voice like gravel. Step away from the lady. I looked around Marcus directly into my brother's furious, disbelieving eyes. Let me make this crystal clear so you can go home and report it to Mom and Dad. If you ever show up at my office again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. If you show up at my apartment or my new lake house, or if you continue to blow up my phone with threats, I will immediately file for a restraining order. David's jaw dropped. The golden boy had never been spoken to like this in his entire life. He had never faced a boundary with actual teeth. You're threatening me with the police, he stammered, his arrogant facade finally cracking. Over a ring? No, I corrected him. Over my safety and my peace of mind. I am done being your ATM, and I am done being this family's punching bag. Escort him out, Marcus. If he resists, call the Chicago PD. Right this way, sir, Marcus said, gesturing firmly toward the revolving glass doors. David looked at me, searching for any sign of the weak, compliant sister he had bullied for 30 years. He found nothing but steel. Muttering a string of bitter curses under his breath, he turned and stormed out of the lobby, the heavy glass doors spinning wildly in his wake. A few colleagues were watching from the elevator bank, their eyes wide. A year ago, the embarrassment of a public family scene would have crushed me. Today, as I smoothed the lapels of my jacket, I felt no shame whatsoever. I felt an incredible, surging wave of power. I scanned my ID badge at the turnstile, the little green light flashing in the lobby. The war had officially escalated, and I knew my parents would be next. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't bringing tears to a gunfight. I was bringing the law. Here is part 6. This is the climax of the story, where the psychological conflict peaks, the financial truth is laid bare, and the legal boundaries are firmly set. I have expanded the dialogue and descriptions to give this confrontation the heavy, dramatic weight it deserves. By Wednesday, my family's panicked rage had morphed into a desperate, calculated offensive. As I sat in my office reviewing a marketing proposal, an email pinged into my personal inbox. It was from a law firm, specifically the estate lawyer my father used for his golf club business. The subject line read, Urgent, Defamation and Financial Obligations. I opened it and actually let out a dry, disbelieving laugh. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It vaguely threatened a lawsuit for public defamation regarding my social media post and absurdly implied that I had a verbal contractual obligation to contribute to David's engagement ring. It was a bluff, completely devoid of actual legal merit, designed purely to terrify the compliant, people-pleasing daughter I used to be. They thought I would cower. Instead, I forwarded the email to Emma. Emma had been my best friend since our freshman year of college. More importantly, she was now one of the most ruthless, brilliant civil litigators in Chicago. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Sarah, Emma said, her voice crackling with professional indignation. This is the most pathetic, legally illiterate cease and desist attempt I have ever seen. They are trying to bully you with big words because they have absolutely zero leverage over your money. Do you want to end this game once and for all? Yes, I breathed, feeling the weight of 30 years of emotional extortion pressing down on my chest. I want to cut the strings. Completely. Then let's set a meeting. Neutral ground. Public place. And let me do what I do best. We arranged to meet my parents and David that evening at a busy, upscale coffee shop in downtown Chicago. Emma explicitly chose a location with excellent lighting, plenty of witnesses, and highly visible security cameras. There would be no screaming, no cornering, and no physical intimidation. When Emma and I arrived and took our seats at a large corner booth, they were already there. The visual contrast was striking. My mother, Susan, was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, already weaponizing her tears before a single word was spoken. My father, Robert, sat with his arms tightly crossed, his jaw set in a furious, authoritative line. Next to him was David, looking incredibly smug, clearly believing that the intimidating lawyer email had successfully brought me to my knees. "Sarah," my father barked the moment I sat down, not even acknowledging Emma's presence. "I am glad you finally came to your senses. Your mother hasn't slept in 3 days. The embarrassment you have caused this family is unforgivable. I expect you to take down that spiteful post immediately, put that ridiculous cabin on the market, and write your brother the check for $30,000. If you do that, we are willing to forgive you and sweep this ugly tantrum under the rug." He spoke to me like I was a disobedient teenager who had broken curfew, not a 30-year-old corporate executive who had just bought her own home. "I'm not here to apologize, Dad," I said, my voice remarkably steady, "and I'm definitely not here to write David a check." My mother let out a theatrical gasp, burying her face in her hands. "Sarah, how can you be so cold? After everything we have given you. We raised you, we provided for you, and the moment you get a little bit of money, you turn your back on your own flesh and blood. Everything you've given me?" I repeated, the cold clarity of the truth sharpening my words. I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out a thick, meticulously tabbed manila folder. I dropped it onto the center of the coffee shop table with a heavy thud. "What is this?" David sneered, leaning away from the folder as if it were radioactive. "That," Emma spoke up for the first time, her voice smooth, professional, and dripping with absolute authority, "is a comprehensive financial audit of this family's expenditures over the last 12 years, compiled from your own public records, Sarah's banking history, and the incredibly documented text messages your mother has sent demanding money." My parents froze. The smugness vanished from David's face. I opened the folder, flipping to the first highlighted spreadsheet. "Let's talk about everything you've given me, Mom. Let's look at the math of this family's love." Page 1, college tuition. David's out-of-state private university costs, $200,000, paid in full by you and Dad. My in-state tuition, $0. I took out student loans and worked 2 jobs as a waitress to pay them off. My father opened his mouth to interrupt, but I held up a hand, my eyes locked onto his. "I am speaking." I flipped the page. Page 2, vehicles. David's graduation present was a $40,000 luxury sedan. When my 10-year-old used Honda broke down, you told me it built character to take the bus in the Chicago winter. Page 3, the family bailouts. Over the last 5 years, you and Dad have drained $150,000 from your own retirement accounts to cover David's failed business ventures and credit card debt. "That is family business," my father hissed, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "You have no right to throw that in our faces. David is a man. He has different pressures. David is a parasite." I cut him off, the word hanging in the air like a blade. "And I am the host you expect to feed him." For the last 5 years, Mom has texted me almost monthly, begging me to transfer portions of my paycheck to cover David's rent, his car insurance, his vacations. You ignored my 30th birthday to celebrate his entry-level job, and then demanded $30,000 of my bonus to buy his girlfriend a diamond. I closed the folder and pushed it toward them. "You didn't forget my birthday. You just didn't care. To you, I am not a daughter. I am an ATM. But the ATM is permanently out of service." David slammed his hands on the table, half rising from his seat. "You ungrateful little bitch. I'll make sure you never." "Sit down and shut your mouth," Emma snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. She leaned forward, her eyes locked onto David with the predatory intensity of a seasoned lawyer. David slowly sank back into his chair, genuinely intimidated. Emma pulled a crisp, formal legal document from her briefcase and slid it across the table. "This is a formal cease and desist order," Emma stated, her tone icy and precise. "It applies to all three of you. As of this exact second, you are legally prohibited from contacting my client regarding any financial demands. You will not show up at her place of employment. You will not approach her residence in Chicago, nor her property in Michigan. You will not send her threatening emails via your laughably incompetent estate lawyer." My father stared at the document, the reality of the situation finally piercing his armor of entitlement. "You're bringing lawyers into a family matter? You're threatening your own parents with the law." "You threatened me first, Dad," I said quietly. "You just didn't think I would fight back." Emma tapped the paper with her tailored fingernail. "If any of you violate this order, or if you continue this campaign of financial harassment and psychological extortion, my next step will be filing for an emergency restraining order. I will bring this entire spreadsheet, along with every abusive text message, straight to a judge. I will drag this family's pristine country club reputation through a public courtroom so fast it will make your head spin. Do we understand each other?" The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's fake tears had instantly dried up, replaced by genuine shock. My father stared at the table, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter, completely stripped of his power. David looked pale, staring at the cease and desist order like it was a death warrant for his extravagant lifestyle. They had no leverage, no control. The illusion was shattered. I stood up, smoothing the front of my coat. I didn't feel angry anymore. Looking at the three of them, so desperate, so consumed by appearances and entitlement, I just felt a profound, liberating emptiness. "Goodbye, Mom." "Goodbye, Dad," I said. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, Emma right beside me. As the cool evening air of the city hit my face, I took a deep breath. My chest, which had been tight with anxiety for 3 decades, finally expanded completely. The chains were gone. The days immediately following the confrontation at the coffee shop were strange. I kept my phone close, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion, a barrage of blocked voicemails, a surprise visit at my apartment, or a dramatic email from another legally illiterate family friend. But nothing came. The cease and desist letter, backed by Emma's terrifying competence and the undeniable truth of that spreadsheet, had worked. The silence from my parents and David was absolute. At first, that silence was deafening. Cutting off your biological family is rarely the picture-perfect, triumphant montage that movies make it out to be. There is a deep, complex grief that comes with it. Sitting on the deck of my lake house on my first completely free weekend, I found myself crying. I wasn't crying because I missed them, or because I regretted keeping my hard-earned money. I wept for the 10-year-old Sarah who had waited by the window for parents who were always too busy cheering for her brother. I mourned the family I deserved but never actually had. But as the weeks turned into months, the grief slowly began to wash away, carried off by the gentle ripples of Lake Michigan. In its place, something entirely new took root, absolute, unshakable peace. Without the constant, low-level anxiety of being my family's emergency fund, my life blossomed. At work, my focus sharpened. I was promoted to Senior Director of Strategy, a milestone I celebrated without having to immediately hide my salary increase from a mother looking to fund her son's lifestyle. But my true healing happened at the lake house. It became my ultimate sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my independence. I spent my weekends transforming the cedar cabin into a home that reflected only me. I painted the kitchen a cheerful, bright yellow. I bought oversized, plush furniture that practically swallowed you whole when you sat down with a good book. And exactly as I had promised myself, I planted a magnificent rose garden along the front porch, vibrant red and soft pink blooms that thrived under my careful attention. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was the architect of my own life. By late summer, the house was ready to be filled with the right kind of noise. I began hosting weekend getaways, slowly building the chosen family that I had so desperately needed. One Saturday afternoon, the deck was alive with laughter and the smell of barbecue. Emma was manning the grill, expertly flipping burgers while arguing good-naturedly with Marcus, the security guard from my building whom I had invited after he helped me face down my brother. My boss, Mr. Thompson, had even driven up with his wife, bringing a beautiful set of crystal wine glasses as a housewarming gift. Colleagues and friends lounged on the Adirondack chairs, passing around bowls of potato salad and pouring drinks. I stood by the wooden railing, looking at the vibrant, happy group of people. No one here wanted anything from me. No one was keeping score. They weren't here because we shared a bloodline. They were here because they genuinely valued my presence. They celebrated my wins, big and small, without ever asking for a cut. Emma walked over, handing me a freshly grilled burger on a paper plate and bumping her shoulder against mine. "You built a good life here, Sarah." A really good life." "I did." I smiled, looking out at the sun glittering on the water. I finally stopped waiting for a seat at their table and just built my own. The toxic cycle was broken. I had survived the storm, and the shore I washed up on was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. Exactly 1 year later, the morning sun painted the surface of Lake Michigan in brilliant strokes of gold. I stood on my cedar deck, breathing in the crisp, pine-scented air. Today was my 31st birthday. There was no knot of dread in my stomach. I didn't spend the morning frantically checking my phone, hoping for a breadcrumb of affection from people who never truly saw me. In fact, my phone was resting peacefully on the kitchen counter, quietly playing a jazz playlist that echoed softly through my beautiful, sunlit home. The cease and desist order had held firm. Aside from a few passive-aggressive, vague social media posts from my mother that Emma gleefully monitored and ignored, they had vanished from my life. David had been forced to take out a high-interest loan to pay for his absurd engagement ring, and my father was supposedly furious about the financial strain. But their chaos was no longer my emergency. I was entirely free. By noon, the lake house was buzzing with life. The driveway was packed with the cars of my chosen family. Emma was setting up a massive charcuterie board in the kitchen. Marcus and Mr. Thompson were out on the dock, trying their luck at fishing while laughing loudly at a terrible joke. My colleagues were sprawled across the plush outdoor sofas, passing around bottles of chilled champagne. "All right, everyone, gather around the birthday girl." Emma's voice rang out over the chatter. She walked through the sliding glass doors carrying a spectacular, multi-tiered chocolate cake. The icing was flawless, and on top, exactly 31 candles burned bright and warm. They weren't pathetic, lonely little flames. They were a roaring celebration of survival. The crowd erupted into a loud, off-key, entirely joyful rendition of "Happy Birthday." I looked around the circle of faces illuminated by the candlelight. These were people who respected my boundaries. These were people who celebrated my mind, my career, and my heart without ever asking to look at my bank account. "Make a wish, Sarah." Marcus cheered from the back. I closed my eyes for a brief second. A year ago, I would have wished for my family to finally love me the way I needed them to. Today, I realized I didn't need to make a wish at all. Everything I could ever want was already standing right here on this wooden deck. I opened my eyes, smiled, and blew out all 31 candles in a single breath. The applause echoed across the water, carrying my name into the bright, open sky. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was Sarah, and my life was just beginning.